The Pittsburgh Steelers are set to play their final preseason game against the Detroit Lions. We'll break down what to expect from the offense and if what we'll see is closer to what to really expect in the regular season. Talk about the defensive line, and a final 53-man roster projection, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Steelers fans, getting ready for this final preseason game, 1 p.m. Saturday in Detroit. The Steelers are set to play their starters, and it looks like Dan Campbell and the Lions will play theirs for an extended period of time. So this could be the best look that we've gotten all year to see what will the Steelers actually look like when they take the field in the regular season. But we have talked all week with offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, with Russell Wilson, who is going to start the game at quarterback. Mike Tomlin did confirm that on Thursday after practice. But we've been talking about why the Steelers offense hasn't shown what it's actually going to look like, why they've been experimenting. But there is a point where I personally feel they want to and need to show who they really are at some point in this preseason. Put it on tape. It would be different if this was Ben Roethlisberger in his 6th year with Todd Haley and they had Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell. You wouldn't need it. Just they wouldn't even play. Just, you know what, send out Landry Jones or whoever was the third string quarterback or the backup quarterback then, and let them work to improve. That's not what you need to see. But this offensive unit, even with Russell Wilson, who's been a long time veteran, 12-year player on his 13th season with 9 Pro Bowls, even with him, this is a new offense. Russell Wilson hasn't led a winning team that's been successful for a few years. There's a bunch of young players, guys on their rookie deals still on this offense. They need to put it on tape, not just for me, not just for you as a fan to feel good, but I think for themselves. And that is what I expect to see more of in this preseason game. It won't be the whole thing. It won't be the entire game, but I estimate there's going to be a point where Mike Tomlin's like, no, get a touchdown. Go out there and put points up on the board. Show that you can finish a drive or make a big play. Because that, I think, can be worth a whole lot, especially for a young team that needs to build off momentum. And I think that that's something that is a little bit underrated in this discussion. I remember it was the 2008 season, Mike Tomlin's 2nd year coaching the Steelers, and it was that preseason, and they had been stinking on offense, and there was at one point, I think it was the 2nd preseason game, and they were playing against the Vikings, and they didn't score. They hadn't scored yet in preseason. Mike Tomlin made them go back out there. Ben Roethlisberger hits Santonio Holmes for like a bomb, and he scores a touchdown. It's like, all right, that's what I was looking to see. I think Mike Tomlin's going to push his guys to do something like that. I think at some point, if they aren't scoring, they're going to want to put an exclamation point on their work to show, hey, we can do this in live action, not against each other in practice, and put it out there. And again, it's not to appease fans. It's not to appease reporters or anything like that. I think that it's important for the confidence. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how aggressive the quarterbacks are allowed to get in this game. Arthur Smith admitted this week during Steelers practices when we got to talk to him that they were holding back. He held back Russell Wilson in what he was allowed to call, and that kind and what he was called, and what Russell Wilson was going to be allowed to do. Part of that was by design because of Russell Wilson not playing a whole lot with the ones. But now Russell Wilson's had another week to work with them after his first preseason game. Justin Fields has been there. I think the Steelers, not a whole lot. You're not going to see the whole offense. You're not going to see them trying to drop 30 in this preseason game. But I think you're going to see these guys cut loose just a little bit more. And I think you're going to see the closest thing we've seen to the Steelers offense in this game. Now, we've also been told that all healthy Steelers starters will play in this game. I anticipate that does not mean much for Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick. I think those guys sit up. But I think like an Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, those guys will play. If Peyton Wilson's good in the concussion, if he's out of concussion protocol, which we don't know, we can't fully report. If all that happens, we'll see what goes on there. But the defense, I don't think has to prove too much. We'll get into those guys in a bit. But the big thing is the offense, and we got a chance to talk to Justin Fields. And, I think he is taking all of this in stride. We've talked about how it seems pretty obvious that the Steelers are setting up Russell Wilson to just be the starting quarterback. But Justin Fields, says he's like, I think I've shown who I am, or I think I've shown what I need to show. But he's also like ready to, I think, continue to step up whenever asked. And he understands the situation that he's in. And I got to ask him, about, this is a guy who wants to prove, not just to the Steelers, but to the entire NFL, that he can still be that quarterback the Bears thought he was when they picked him in the first round years ago. And in the Steelers preseason, he's shown he's more composed than what I think a lot of people started to do, but he still hasn't shown the exclamation point. He still hasn't shown the whoa. There's the complete picture of what you, or at least the glimpse of the picture that you want to see of Justin Fields. He hasn't led a touchdown drive yet. And I thought I wanted to ask him, I was like, hey, like, what's the balance of trying to make that big play, but also sticking to the script or sticking to within the concepts that are being called in this preseason game? And I thought his answer was a little interesting. Here's Justin Fields after Steelers practice on Thursday. Justin, how do you balance, you want to stay within the structure of the play, and Russell talked about this yesterday, but you have a great arm. You've shown that you can launch the ball deep. How do you control the balance of wanting to stay within the play, but also wanting to show, hey, I can connect on those plays downfield in this offense?
You just got to, kind of know when it's the right time to take those risks downfield, when it's that time to take a shot downfield. I think we talk a lot about the intent of the play. You got plays where you're just looking for a completion, and you got your plays where you're trying to take shots downfield. So just knowing when those, time when it's that time of the game to take shots downfield, to try to make a play, and you also know other times where it's time to just get the ball in your hands, or just try to get a completion or a get back on track situation. So.
Justin, as a group, what's keeping what you guys are doing in practice from showing up in games?
I think I think the first 2 weeks we didn't really game plan much. We were kind of in training camp mode. It's still not an excuse for not putting up as many points as we want on the board, but I think just overall execution. So I think if everybody does their job the way we know we can, we're going to do what we're supposed to do.
That do your job line right there, I think, is the bottom line with this game. Is the Steelers need to see guys fill out there. Also, again, when you listen to Justin Fields, he doesn't sound alarmed like he has to do something outside of himself to prove himself in this game. I think he knows, stay the course, continue to do what the coaches are asking of you, and play within it. And I think that's what the Steelers want out of their quarterback at the end of the day. Like we talked about with Alan Saunders in the Thursday episode. The Steelers want a quarterback that, this is still a team that's going to be led by its defense. I've said that a million times, and I will say it a million times more. This is still a defensively led team. They just want this offense to be more efficient and to just not be in the bottom part of the league. Like if it's in the middle part of the league, this team is one of the better teams in football. And that's where they're trying to get it. Now, will it get there? We'll see. They've been trying to get at this for 3-4 years now, and they haven't really cracked that just yet. But again, I think that's where they're trying to get these quarterbacks to understand. I think Russell Wilson gets it. That's the projection that he's going to play to, and that's why he's protecting the ball. We showed that clip, I think yesterday on yesterday's show about that as well. But I think Justin Fields also gets it. Now, whether he gets it and can put it on the field, that's another story. I think that's also a story that Russell Wilson needs to prove, and that's part of why I think this will be a prove it type of night for type of afternoon, Saturday for the Steelers offense, more so than the other first two preseason games are. We'll see how that plays out. But I also want to talk about the defensive line. We talked to Alex Highsmith, and I thought it was interesting the way how he answered this question we kind of got here. We'll go over that and still a look at some 53-man roster projections here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind you this show is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day in the gym, or maybe you never skip therapy day. When your schedule gets packed with work, activities, with kids, and just life in general, it's easy to get your priorities mixed up and let them slip through the cracks. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it sometimes. But when you feel you have no time for yourself, that's where non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. That's where having a good therapist can help you organize your own life. Not only can you figure out what really makes your life better, but you can also figure out how to balance it with everything else in your life. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp knows life can be busy and stressful, so it's designed to be suitable for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time with no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue. Let's flip over to the defense. We've done a lot of talking about the offense, and rightfully so. It's the unit that has the biggest question marks, the most unsure about, and everyone wants to see the most. But there's still parts of this defense that I think need to be seen, and part of the defense that I think needs to show up this year even more so is the defensive line, particularly because there are young players in the defensive line that need to prove themselves that they're taking steps forward. There's also older players in the defensive line that you're not sure how much longer they'll be with the team. Cam Hayward, how much longer will he be in the NFL? Larry Ogunjobi, his contract is not exactly the friendliest to the Steelers with the production he brought out last year, though I do think he played very well in the last preseason game. I think that there's a lot of questions on the defensive line, but I went to talk to Alex Highsmith, and I didn't go to talk about the defensive line. I went to talk to him about, the outside linebackers and the edge rushers. And when I went to ask him, I went, because everyone kind of knows him and TJ Watt, they're the best 1-2 punch as edge rushers in the NFL. That there's no questions about if they're ready, what they worked up. We can drum that up, and that can get you like a nice, safe sound bite. But I wanted to hear, okay, behind him, behind Highsmith, behind Watt, and behind Herbig, because he's now proven himself to be, I think, a very reliable backup option, who are the guys that are stepping up? And it was interesting because you'll listen to this response here, and Alex Highsmith doesn't go to other edge rushers like I thought he would. He went into the defensive line. But hear for yourself, here's Alex Highsmith after Steelers practice on Thursday.
You, TJ, and Nick are playmakers that everyone's going to remember from last year, but who are some of the guys that have shown a lot in camp to now getting ready for this third preseason game that you think should be notable?
Yeah, like I said, Leal being one of those guys. Also, speaking from a D-line perspective, I think Juan Adams has, made a lot of plays, so he's a guy who's come out and, got to sack that first game. And so just seeing how those guys, are going to continue to get better and better. But there's been a lot of guys stepping up, but, those two in particular have had, strong camps and getting better.
Do you see a big difference with DeMarvin and Keanu as guys who are second and third year players from what you've seen before?
Yeah, no, I think both of those guys have taken big jumps this year, especially for DeMarvin going to year 3 and also Keanu year 2. We got to have those guys be big, huge for us this year, and we know they're going to, and so it's cool to see how they've grown and gotten more mature and gotten better.
So if you go back to the start of my question there, you can tell I didn't say D-line. He jumped to D-line. Now, what does that say about the other edge rushers? I might say that they're not exactly impressive. But right before that question, he was kind of talking about DeMarvin Leal a little bit, and he talked about how he could play on the edge and how he was impressing and what they were asking of him. And that's why I've been saying for about a month or so now, maybe even more, since the start of training camp, I think DeMarvin Leal is back to where he was supposed to be after his first season. Last year was a bit of a rough year for him. Got healthy scratched at the end of the year. Wasn't even allowed to be dressing on game days. But this year, I think he's ready to be a much better contributor, both against the run and in his pass rush. And they're using him on the inside and on the edge. And maybe he is that fourth option on the edge. But also talking about Keanu Benton, and he threw in Montrevious Adams, who I also think has had a really good training camp and preseason. This might be a deeper defensive line than what we've given it credit for the Steelers this whole time when we look at this unit here. Now, we know Braden Fajoko, he had an injury. He's been, waived or whatever, and so he's not in the mix. But, you look at the guys at the top of the list: Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Larry Ogunjobi, DeMarvin Leal, Montrevious Adams. That's your 5 right there that you are on the team, but you still have a chance to choose against a guy like Isaiah Loudermilk, who's been on the team for some years, Logan Lee, who's your rookie that you just drafted this season, Dean Lowry, a guy who's been in the NFL for several years. you have a good assortment of guys in that D-line to pick from. But again, I think the whole part here is that you have two young guys that are ready to rise up through the ranks and show that they're much better than they have been and be kind of wreckers on that Steelers defensive front in new ways that we haven't seen in for some time. I mean, you think about last year, the defensive line was one of the problems with last year. It was taking Keanu Benton time to mature, so he wasn't always getting all the reps. Larry Ogunjobi was kind of banged up throughout the season, so he didn't get a whole lot of chances. And Cam Hayward got suffered an injury in training camp that kind of messed with him the entire season. So the three top guys you were expecting to lead the way on what was, for years had been, one of the best defensive fronts in football, they were either MIA or not available. And there was, I think that was a problem. But this year, if Cam Hayward's healthy, which, we've seen him in practice, we haven't really seen him in games, you presume that he's healthy. If Ogunjobi can be, kind of what we saw in this last preseason game and a better player than he was last year, and they're boosted by guys like Adams and Benton and Leal, that makes that defensive front so much stronger. And again, then you have also TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. And then you get back to where the Steelers were in the years where it was Stephon Tuitt with Cam Hayward, with Javon Hargrave, with TJ Watt, with Bud Dupree. Actually, I think Hargrave, that was only like a year or two of that. But there was that time where they were undeniably the best, front in football because their defensive line was just punishing you in the middle. And then their edge rushers were just bringing heat off the edges. And, I'm not saying that they'll get to that right away. I think Keanu Benton is a young, promising guy that's going to continue to rise and be the flag bearer for what it means to be a Steelers defensive lineman in the near future. But I would not be shocked to see this group overperform or kind of beat expectations for this upcoming season by the way that I've seen from them, what I've heard from them, and when you hear other guys talk about them, even when I'm not asking about the defensive line, Alex Highsmith is going and talking about them. But if that group is special, I think it makes this defense even better than what people were expecting to be. I continue to push this narrative that I think the Steelers defense is a lot better than what people are going to expecting from it, maybe outside of those who cover the Steelers. I think Joey Porter Jr. with a mix of Dante Jackson and Corey Trice is going to be a nasty cornerback tandem. I think that Minkah Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott and DeMonte KZ are going to be a heck of a safety trio. I think Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, and Landon Roberts are going to be a heck of a linebacker trio, and Mark Robinson's not looking that bad either. And if Cole Holcomb ever gets healthy, look out for them. It is going to be tough to find a spot on this defense to pick on if they are healthy and ready to go and living up to what I think their true expectations are. And the defensive line, if they are being underrated right now, I think that is a huge key to getting there in the first place. But who among this roster, who on this roster right now, the 91 players that have been with the Steelers at the South Side and in Latrobe, who on there is going to make this final 53-man rosters? I have 44 guys that I think are guaranteed locks onto the roster, but who is going to be of those final 9? We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats these days and might not have the time or resources to hire. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here, and I want to take a look at this 53-man roster to give us a chance to look at some of the players that there are. So I'll go position by position where I see things playing out. Now, as I said, there are 44 players that I think are pretty much on the roster as is when it comes to the 53-man roster. We'll start, quarterback on offense, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Kyle Allen, not in that order. I'm just reading the guys as I clicked on them in this simulator. Those three quarterbacks there, I think there's a chance that maybe they leave Kyle Allen out and they just roll with Fields and Wilson in a practice squatter. But for the sake of traditional, roster play and what the Steelers have gone through in recent years, where last year they needed three quarterbacks and, 2 years before that, they needed four quarterbacks. I think that they might try to play it safe, protect their quarterbacks, especially with a young offensive line going with three quarterbacks there. Running backs, I think three running backs, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Cordero Patterson. Now, maybe they take an extra running back temporarily with Jalen Warren suffering through a hamstring injury and reportedly, in risk of not playing against the Falcons in week 1. But as a person who's seen Jalen Warren walking around, I think that he's going to be fine for that, and that shouldn't be too much of a problem. So I think that they still just take three there and maybe practice squad another running back who they occasionally promote here and there. At wide receiver, this is where I think it starts to get tricky because this is one of those positions that the Steelers sometimes load up at or decide to scale back on, and it could be telling for what their plans are for this season. For example, on the final 53 so far of the 44 guys, I only have 4 of them being receivers. I'm not saying they will take only 4, but of the guys that I'm very confident that will be on the roster, George Pickens, Roman Wilson, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin, those are the 4. After that, I think it gets kind of tricky. And that's where I think that, that we could look at what the Steelers need. Now, we'll come back to that as we go through the rest of the roster to explain where these last 9 picks can be. Now, tight end, I think it's a foregone conclusion. Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward. We could add a 4th one there with Michael Pruitt because he's been pretty good and he knows Arthur Smith's system, but we'll come back there in a minute because it's going to be about what do you value the most as far as filling out your roster. Now, other guys that you kind of have to the offensive line, this one's one of the bigger ones. I think that with the injury to Nate Herbig, it kind of puts them in a bit of a bind. So they're going to probably take 9 guys where I think there was a chance they might have taken more before, but now they probably won't. But you look at, the obvious starters, Broderick Jones, Dan Moore, Isaac Seumalo, James Daniels, Zach Frazier. They're all there. Troy Fautanu, they're not going to, of course, leave him up. I think also Spencer Anderson is going to be on that list. I think that Mason McCormick's going to be on that list, the rookie, and I also think Dylan Cook is going to be on that list because they need another tackle option out there, and I think that he can be one of those guys that they rely upon. So right there, that's 9 offensive linemen. Excuse me. I think that's kind of what you'll be looking at for there. But again, we'll come back to see, do you want to add that with one of your last 9 players on the defensive line? I have 5 guys I know are making the team: Ogunjobi, Leal, Hayward, Adams, Benton. Who comes behind them? We'll revisit that in a sec. At linebacker, and this is inside and outside linebacker, Patrick Queen, Landon Roberts, Peyton Wilson, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig. So there's 6 there. We'll come back to that in a second. At cornerback, I only have 4 guaranteed guys in Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, Corey Trice Jr., Beanie Bishop, who's also a junior. Is this just the juniors of cornerbacks? Because everyone's a junior. It's kind of crazy. There's also Thomas Graham Jr. Anyways, we'll get to that in a little bit. But again, 4 corners there, so you presume they're probably going to at least get 1 more there. And then at safeties, I have 4 safeties guaranteed. Minka Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, DeMonte KZ, and Miles Killebrew there at safety. And, of course, special teamers, Christian Kuntz, the long snapper, Cameron Johnson, the new punter, who is doing fantastic, by the way. He's setting himself up to be around for a while. And Chris Boswell, the kicker. So there you have it. No more special teamers. Again, we're going to rule out quarterbacks. We're going to rule out running backs. As far as other positions, let's go back to wide receiver and let's look at who else is available here and who would you want to take if you're the Steelers. Now, when we're talking to players, one thing that that Justin Fields said, he said, I feel bad for anyone that has to cover Scotty Miller. And I think that Scotty Miller has been really good in camp. He's got great separation. He's shown really good hands. I do think Scotty Miller ends up being one of those final 53 guys. So I will make him my 45th player here. Again, you had 9 open spots, and I think now we have 8 with the math there. Now, typically you want at least 5 receivers, but in today's NFL, you often take 6 because you want to be prepared for injuries. I mean, you go back to, some of the years with Antonio Brown. There was one year where because of all the injuries to guys like, I think it was Juju, and Martavis was suspended, and Marcus Wheaton was injured, all these things, that they were down to Darius Hayward-Bay, Kobe Hamilton, and Antonio Brown. And there was like the only 3 receivers they had to finish one of their games. I think the Steelers don't want to be in that position again. I think they also get a Des Fitzpatrick. We've talked with Alan Saunders and Nick Farabaugh both about that. I think Des Fitzpatrick's a good gunner on special teams, but he's also a guy that you can also throw in there in emergencies at wide receiver. So there's your 6 wide receivers. That takes us to 46 out of 53 players on the roster here. Now, tight end is tricky because typically you keep 3 tight ends. This is an offense that's going to use tight ends a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of 12 personnel. I think there's going to be a lot of 13 personnel. And with that, I think that Arthur Smith is going to want to keep an extra guy there. And Michael Pruitt's a guy that's been in the system. Connor Hayward's also a guy that you can flex into like a fullback role. And I know some people are going to say, what about Jack Collette at fullback? I like Jack Collette's physicality, but I think that Connor Hayward just brings so much more to the table, and they're going to need these spots elsewhere. So I'm going to say Michael Pruitt is one of those guys that makes the roster, and that's 4 tight ends, which is a little different, but at the same time, I think that it's because of what this offense is going to be, and there's going to be a lot of tight end usage. And with tight end usage, you're not going to want to limit that if one guy gets hurt, which is what might happen if you can't run a 13 personnel type formation when you really want to. So again, tight end, expect 4 there, which pinches back at other positions. It's also why I think there's only going to be 9 offensive linemen. You look at the other offensive linemen on the list here: Ryan McCollum, Nate Herbig is on IR, Joey Fisher, Devery Hamilton, Tyler Beach. I think that with the 9 that you have listed, again, Faltanu, Jones, Frazier, Sayamalu, Daniels, McCormick, Moore, Anderson, and Cook, you have 9 guys. I think they're kind of working out guys like Spencer Anderson or James Daniels to move to center if Zach Frazier goes down. This gives you 4 offensive tackles in case Troy Faltanu needs more time to recover and one of your other tackles go down, because Dylan Cook can help out there while Broderick Jones, Dan Moore are holding it down. So again, I think that there are answers there, both interior and on the outside. Now, where I do think you end up adding 2 out of this, and where we get our 48th player here, is I do think that you see a defensive lineman added naturally, because you want at least 2 rotations of 3 defensive linemen or 3 rotations of 2, depending on how much the Steelers use a traditional 3-4 defense or a nickel defense. And that's where I do think it gets a little tricky, because I think the Steelers want someone who's going to be big, physical, be in there. That Willington Prevalon is just a really, really big dude, and he's massive. But I'm going to lean on a guy who's been very experienced in the NFL, and I think they're going to want a guy who's experienced back there. And I'm gonna look at Dean Lowry, and a lot of this might come down to how some of these guys perform in this last preseason game. Dean Lowry's been injured, but he knows the expectations of the NFL. I think it's either him or Loudermilk. Loudermilk's been around. Logan Lee's also a rookie; he could be in there, but I could see Logan Lee being a 6th round pick. A guy that they might try to practice squad and sneak onto the practice squad because he was so late of a pick. So I'm gonna go with Dean Lowry for now as my 6th defensive lineman for the Steelers roster. Now you're down to 5 players left that you can pick now. For the sake of how the 53-man roster works, you need to fill your 53-man roster, and then anyone that you got that's not on IR already, you move to IR after the fact and work it that way. I think that's what's going to happen with Cole Holcomb, because he's at least going to be put on the PUP or something like that, or a temporary injured reserve there, because he's there. But I think he gets on and then is put on IR, and they figure this out. I think Mark Robinson's done enough to put it there. He's been really good on special teams. He's been helping in coverage. He's always been a good hitter in the run game. I think that he's put it together pretty well. So he's a guy there. I think that might mean Tyler Matakevich is out. We talked about this with Alan a little bit on yesterday's show, but I think Matakevich, Dirty Red, even though they brought him back, he's experienced, in the NFL, but he's also older. He's slower. I think they like him a lot. Remember, they brought him in. He was a 7th round pick from many years ago, and he's been in the NFL for almost a decade now. But I think just reality is you want the athletic guys. But I also think the Steelers do keep a 4th outside linebacker, and I think it's going to be Kyron Johnson, simply because he's looked good in preseason. He's helped in special teams, and they need guys who do that. Now, whether or not Kyron Johnson plays a whole lot on the edge, that's a whole nother story, because if DeMar Leal's helping out there, that might be their sneaky way of not needing to add too many backup edge guys to the Steelers defense there. But if you look at that in total, after those guys I've just added here, including Cole Holcomb, Mark Robinson, maybe you put Cole Holcomb on the temporary injured reserve, and then go back and get Tyler Matakevich at least temporarily, because you cut him. Presumably you can probably pick him up again really quickly off waivers. You're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 linebackers there at your availabilities. 4 of those being outside linebackers, 5 of those being inside linebackers. I think that's a healthy amount to prepare for each of those. So there's that. Then we go to cornerback, where again, this is a tricky one, because you need to account for slot cornerbacks and outside cornerbacks. Now, outside cornerbacks, you have Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, and Corey Trice Jr. I truly believe Darius Rush has played his way onto this team. Maybe I'm wrong there. I've liked what I've seen out of him. I think that he's another prototype guy like Corey Trice. I think Corey Trice is a little further along than him, but I think that Darius Rush is a guy that they want to keep around, and they will keep around for that time. I also think about Thomas Graham Jr. because I think he's been pretty solid, and they want an experienced guy who could jump in the slot if necessary. So I throw those guys in there. And this is where it becomes tricky. So that's 6 cornerbacks right there. With 6 cornerbacks, I now can't add a 5th safety. And so with the 5 safeties there, I really think that the Steelers have to keep Ryan Watts. I think that he's earned it. So then I look back and I see, where do you take a guy off? Where do you find that extra space? Maybe you gamble that no one picks up a Kyron Johnson off the waivers after you cut him, and then you sign him back to your team once you put Cole Holcomb on injured reserve. That's where it's going to have to be tricky. But so in fact, for that, I think I will drop a Kyron Johnson real quick here, just saying, for the sake of putting this all as a full list. And then do Ryan Watts. Also, I'm literally doing this with a simulator. It's with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I work. If you Google Steelers 53-man roster projection Post-Gazette, you can do it. It's a nice little tool. You can go through all the players, pick who you think should be there, and then it lets you set your roster position by position, and then see how your final 53 plays out. So there you have it. I think it's going to be 5 safeties, 6 corners, 8 linebackers, 6 defensive linemen, 9 offensive linemen, 4 tight ends, 6 receivers, 3 running backs, and 3 quarterbacks. And another way they can squeeze it too, again, is if they let go of Kyle Allen, they pick him up and put him on the practice squad, or find a way to expand that there. But bottom line, I think the Steelers, they have really good depth. I think at so many positions this year, it's a little tougher to make some of these cuts, but we will see these guys performing Saturday, 1 p.m. I'll be having a post-game show and post-game reactions here on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. So be sure to tune into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks for tuning into the Locked On Steelers podcast on your Friday. We hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post@gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, here on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. Again, we're back here actually tomorrow, breaking down the Steelers game after they take on the Lions and finish their preseason game. Catch us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.